Okay. Welcome to Social Justice Warrior Leadership Training. I'm Reagan and I'm your moderator for today. I'm a sophomore in high school. Our guest speaker today is Lisa. And we have with us our founder of Platform, Dr. Samantha Jew. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Lisa, I have a couple questions before we talk about our main topic of today. What is one social justice passion you have?
Animal activism. But I have to say they're all connected. You can't separate anyone out. To fight for one is to fight for them all, and the trick is to make sure in your lifestyle that you live into that.
And what is your job?
Well, that's an excellent question. I've just retired from being a professor of philosophy and religion. And now I guess I'm going to be a full-time, what I want to do is be a full-time social justice activist.
But aren't you a
So,
CEO of All Creatures too?
Yes, I am the leader I've started my own organization called Tapestry, which is to work to try to share what I know about this movement from being in it for 40 years and being a scholar with others. And I'm also running another organization, but that's a new job. And so I don't really know how that's all going to shake out. But I'm now the executive director of All Creatures. It's a Christian animal rights organization trying to get Christians to have integrity and live into their teachings of compassion and justice and mercy.
Which is
that is
interesting because you're not a Christian.
Well, it's hard to explain exactly what I am, but it is true I would never qualify by any strict standards for what I'm willing to commit to. It's true. I don't go with a Trinity or, those basic things. But if you take Christianity to be a person who lives their life according to love, then I would be a very strong Christian.
But it's Christianity is how it's defined now is based upon beliefs or practices,
True.
neither which you follow.
That's right. I would have to take Jesus Christ as my savior, for example,
Yeah.
which to me is very narrow and exclusive. And so you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
so this leads into our topic of today of values. So, how does spirituality inform our values?
It ought to shape our values. For example, there's not a religion out there that teaches selfishness. So we should be giving. There's not a religion out there that teaches us to make decisions that hurt others. So we should be compassionate. And there's not a religion out there that says we should be opulent in our lifestyle. So we should live simply. So our values should be completely structured around our belief system so that if we commit to a religion, we accept those basic foundational principles as core to how we live.
I'm
What are some
curious. Go ahead, Reagan.
No,
you
go
can
ahead,
go?
Jamie. Dr. Jew, as it were.
I'm curious to know if, first of all, can you define what your spirituality is for people who don't know you? And actually, also, Reagan, this question is for you too, as well. What is your spirituality?
Reagan, you go first, please.
I would say that I identify as a Christian.
What does that mean
Mm,
to you?
it means to me, in a sense of the values part of it, that you're kind to people and animals of all kind, and you respect others, and you believe in what your values are of the church.
But I'm curious, I want to push you a little bit more, Reagan. When we say, you could say that's just a good person. Why are you defining it within the Christian tradition? Is there something about that particular religion that appeals to you? Or is it because you grew up and your parents are Christians?
I'd say it's a mixture of both, because we go to a Methodist church, and I'm in the youth program. And it's very centered around helping others and following different Bible verses that say to help others. So I guess that would be part of it.
But why not Buddhism or Judaism? Is it because you're not familiar with it, or is it something about with the Christian tradition itself that you hold on to some of the beliefs beyond what you're talking about, the values?
So it goes beyond the beliefs of what we're talking about with the values, because I went through confirmation and we went to different types of religious ceremonies to test out the waters, as to speak.
All right. Now to you, Lisa.
May I push you just a little bit too, Reagan? Gently, because you're very young and I'm very old. So I've had so much time to think about these things that I have to I always want to be very cautious with young people. But you say that you want to be kind to animals. Do you think you can be kind to animals and eat them when you don't need to?
I think it's kind of a complicated question, because I admit I don't like thinking about where the meat comes from as I'm eating it, because that makes me sad. So I think kind of, I guess.
Reagan, I could never answer that question well either, because Lisa has been asking me that question for 30 years now, and I've never been able to answer in a way that makes me feel good about myself. And that pause forces me to eat less and less meat. But it hasn't, because of habit, I haven't been able to stop.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I grew up in a very, my grandparents were in the meat industry, so I guess I've been brought up eating meat, but a lot of my parents' friends are vegans and they don't eat meat, so I've seen both sides of it.
Yeah, you're really lucky that way, because I grew up with a very meaty family, as it were, meat and dairy, and there were no vegans around. I didn't even know any vegetarians. So you young people now are really lucky. There's a strong movement showing a different way of living that doesn't cause unnecessary suffering and bloodshed, and so the path is being cleared. It's a good thing.
Lisa, can we come back to your definition of what spirituality is?
Spirituality, I think, is our connection with something beyond what reason can show us, something outside of the concrete and the rational.
Okay, I'm asking about your spirituality, or do you have a religious tradition which you follow by?
Okay, so that's what I see it as. And yes, I have that. I mean, who doesn't? All of us have that side of us that accepts that there are things that are not rational, things that are beyond our powers or our understanding. So I would argue that everyone has a spiritual side, and it's how much you're in tune with it, or willing to work with it, or touch it, or involve it in your life.
But you're not answering my question in that sense. Do you espouse any religious tradition?
No, not by name. I can't say I'm an X. I'm a Z. I'm a B.
But yet you define yourself as an atheist to many others. Is that a category you would like to accept at this point?
Well, notice I didn't say that.
No, you didn't, which is interesting.
But I think that the thing is, everyone else categorizes me as that. When I don't show up as A, B, C, or Z, Q, P, or D, they decide I'm an atheist, which isn't fair. But that's kind of how it washes out. And I don't self-define as anything. And I don't think you can. I think it's.
No, I find this very interesting, because I've known you for a very long time. 30 years ago, if you're the one who described yourself as an atheist,
Probably.
Atheist vegetarian, and you introduce yourself as such to me.
Well, but remember, that was when I was also 30 years younger. And it was my father who said, don't even talk about religion till you're 60. I still can't talk about religion, according to my father's words. And there's wisdom to that. what do I know about it? Almost nothing, even now. And it's why I don't try to say what I am. It doesn't work. I don't know what I am. I'm not only that, but I think it's unhelpful. It is completely unnecessary. And I also think it's unhelpful to try to categorize yourself. Now,
Religiously.
I think so, yes. Now, if you
Okay.
tie that, as I say, if your spirituality is going to show up in your values, you do need to know what your spirituality is, but it doesn't have to be a concrete label. What it needs to be is a practical sense of the things that are most important to you.
I'm curious. So, Reagan, you could also chime in at this point because I'm interested to know. According to Lisa, you can get values as not from your spirituality, apart from your spirituality or from religious tradition. Do you agree? And if so, what other sources are there for gaining, for having a sense of what your values are? And this is not an easy question because I actually will know
As to
about the
where
answer.
I'm really interested in this comment. I don't think your values have to come from your religion or spirituality. So I'm very clear on that. I think they can come from your family. They can and do come from family, culture, and just your own intellect, I think, as well, your own sense of understanding. But I'm sorry, you had asked Reagan a question that just came to mind.
Do you agree with Lisa, Reagan?
On what aspect?
That values can come up, values can be informed apart from spirituality or religious traditions.
Yeah, I think that you gather your values from different life experiences, and they might change along the way, but you always kind of have a core sense of values that are instilled in you at a young age that even though they may change, you still have a sense of them as you get older.
When you say at a very young age, what are the like strong motivating factors in our youth? Is basically it's primarily faith in our education, right? Our teachers. No, Lisa?
No, I think when we're very young, it's our families. And you can see this, families that value really nice clothes. People tend to value really nice clothes, and families that value the environment. The kid grows up caring about nature and the environment. Those values are instilled very much early in life by family members.
But at what point do you develop your own values? In other words, let us say our family's values X, A, B, C, right? You might find B to be a good value, but find A and C to be crappy. And so, at what point do you sort of evaluate the values that you've been instilled with, start to question, and come with your own value? When I say come up with your own values, it's not complete rejection of what you've been taught, but it's evaluating and deciding whether you want to have those values first. Second, if you want to add other values to that. Either one of you? I'm curious.
Well, you can go ahead first.
I think that so far I have not had a point where I've I know of questioning some of my values. I just kind of like as I experience thing, I kind of they kind of shape my values more of than a really defining moment.
And this is very interesting because what I've noticed is when you're young, the values that you have, your experience, you see through the lens of the values that you were instilled with. Unless they're completely something dramatic happens in your life that forces you to alter your values. And unless we have these dramatic events, we tend to continue the values that our families have taught us, and our families have been impacted by religion, tradition, culture, in others their own experience, and we adopt that.
Yes. And I feel that that's what our values are. And I think that most people rarely question their values and rarely change them. And I think, as Reagan is saying, sometimes there's this kind of a gestalt shift. And a traumas, like we've talked about in some of our other conversations, traumas can cause that. For example, if you go through a really traumatic experience and you always thought that your clothes mattered, you may come out thinking it isn't clothes that matter, it's family, or it's friends, or it's life itself, or whatever it is. So I don't think we question our values. I think very few people do. And as somebody who taught for 20 years at university, it was something I was constantly trying to get my students to do. What are your values? Most people don't even know what their values are. If you don't know what your values are, how are you going to question them? How are you going to live by them? So I'd always encourage my students, please don't do this New Year's thing where you decide what you're going to do all year. Try to every New Year's clarify your values. Sit down and figure out what matters to you and why, and how you can live into that.
The interesting part, you say we're not conscious of it, right? And you're right, we don't know how to name, list what our values are. But the problem is this. I don't know if you've been part with a family, they say, these are the things we want you to value. And you look at their lifestyle and realize these are not the things that they value. So I know a family which says kindness, generosity, compassion, let's say, are the things that we have to embody because that is our religious tradition. But from the examples of your parents that how you are perceived by others and maintain honor is more important than compassion, kindness. And so therefore, you owning those nice pair of clothes, looking outwardly very nice is more important,
Yes.
priority wise, than it is to show compassion. And so the family might say X, Y, and Z. These are what we want you to embody. But what you see from your parents is that other things are actually prioritized.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so what I find with my nieces and nephews is that they don't embody what they hear, but they embody what their parents have done.
May I give a different example?
What is that, Lisa?
You are spot on, but you're picking one that's too easy. Every religion teaches we should be kind and compassionate, and we eat dairy products, which creates
Yes.
the dairy industry. And that to me is the best example. We are so blind to it. We are making choices we would not have to make that are causing tremendous suffering and death. And we talk about compassion and love and kindness and mercy and
But how do we, like, Reagan, do you know what we were talking about in terms of how our parents said we need to be this and that, right? Our religion teaches, and that's what they teach that to us. But when we see our own actions as well as the actions of our parents, we don't do it. We actually just follow their example. And that's the hardest part is what triggers that consciousness of what we do really value, and how can we shift it so that our lives reflect the very values that we want to have, that we've been taught to have, that our religions impels us to have. So how do we make that shift? Because our actions might not be really embodying the very values we think we should have. And the second question, part of that question is, why is this important? Reagan, well, I'm not putting you on the spot. Mind you, I struggle with this too all the time.
And I think we're both very aware how young you are. That these things take so long to think through.
No, she's very wise. You and I are immature. She's very mature.
You're childish. This is true.
Reagan, sort of talk. Yeah, can you? I think are you muted again, Reagan? Yeah, you are muted. We can't hear you. Lisa, why don't you answer that while she gets her sound system back up?
Okay, so give me another synopsis of it again. What was the question?
The idea is, what will trigger us to really embody what we revalue, rather than say one thing and live another?
Nothing, and it's why we don't do it, because we don't have to. We can get away with it. We can talk on and on about love and compassion, And unless someone calls us on it, and this is the important thing about the vegan movement, people are being called on it. Just again, using that example. But it's the same with clothing, but no one's going to call you on it. What you need is a religion, but see the whole structure of religion. And it's one of the reasons I won't identify. So it's capitalistic. So you have to give money to the church because the person has to live. And so the person has to give a sermon that you agree with, or you're going to walk out of the church and they're not going to have money. So there's this exchange going on that prevents them doing what a religion really needs to do, which is not to tell you what you want to hear, but to tell you what you need to hear about your values and your lifestyle. And it doesn't go together.
But I'm asking you, Lisa, let's be honest. If I told you my values were money, myself, and my happiness, are you going to be satisfied with that answer? If I told you right out, that is my value system, I'm going to prioritize that. And by golly, if I'm honest about my values, then I don't really need to change it.
It's true, but then don't in the same breath tell me you're a Christian and love is the core of your religion.
No, I'm not a Christian.
Okay, and that's why I love working inside religious traditions, because when you get inside a religious tradition, there are core ideas, and the person either needs to pony up and stand up to those, or they're going to feel embarrassed inside when they realize they've been called on something that they absolutely need to look at. If you're outside a religious tradition, if you identify as an atheist, it doesn't mean you don't have values or core or important religious principles of your own, but the person won't know them. When you tell me you're a Christian, I know what the core of your religion is.
Reagan, is your mic working now? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. It is, yeah.
So,
okay.
If I ask you right now, Reagan, what are your top 3 values? What would you say they are?
Family.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I haven't thought about this necessarily. So I guess family and friends as top 2, and then being happy with who you are and what you're doing.
Do you embody all those 3 values in your actions?
Daily actions.
Daily actions, not like lofty, like I would like to.
Right, or once a year. Daily actions.
Yeah, I'd say I do.
She's more consistent than you and I.
Never even thought about her values and living right into them. Look at that.
I think I try to, but I think everybody goes off the path, I guess, in a way sometimes, and gets influenced by that, like people in the outside of their values.
Why are your values, why is knowing your values important? I apologize. This phone is shut off, but it still rings. Why are your values important in social justice work? Why is knowing what your values are, first thing, and knowing how to prioritize those values, why are they important?
Go ahead, Reagan.
I think they're important so you can live out what you're trying to make an impact in. You can show others that whatever you're trying to do or prove or show, that it's possible to attain their goal.
Okay, Lisa, curious.
Absolutely right on. The only thing I'd add to that is because sometimes the chips are down, and you got to have something that you can turn back to that helps you, gives you the light and shows you the way.
It allows us to both of you guys are right in that every day we come up with choices, opportunities, with, how is it? Just little things in which you need to figure out and say, I choose time with my family over watching TV. I choose to be kind to my dog, even though they might be rascals. I choose to take time to talk to other people about social justice issues rather than choosing to just completely shut out people. And all those decisions are, my decisions are informed by my values. And if my actions are not in line with my values, either I have to change my values or I have to change my actions.
Right.
And that means I have to live what? Intentional life.
You have to be aware of your values first and foremost, or you can't do that.
But how do you, like, this is the hard part for me is, can we always prioritize our decision-making process, what we do habitually? Are we capable of prioritizing our values so that our life reflects that?
Reagan?
It's too much, Reagan, I think.
Ah, there she went.
You're muted again, Reagan.
All right, so I'll take it. And I would say, absolutely, we are. But it's a matter of priorities. And I think many of the things about our culture, one of the things I don't like, and many of the problems of our culture stem from the fact that we don't prioritize reflection time. So we are often acting quickly, hastily, desperately. We charge from meeting to meeting, from sidewalk to door, from grocery store to desk. And we don't have the time we need to say, who am I? What am I doing? Why do I think I'm here? And what does that mean? And if we're not doing that, which how many people do you know that are doing that?
I don't know anyone, actually. Yeah.
Exactly. So then we're not going to live into our values. And I think it makes all of our lives less meaningful because we haven't spent the time thinking about who we are. And instead we are living according to we're like puppets. So the capitalism pulls our strings. And I would argue that's the biggest force. The things we buy, the things we want, where we spend our money, where we spend our time, we spend it watching or hearing about nonsense in media that isn't our real lives, buying things that we don't really need because someone made us believe we needed them or that we would be popular or perfect. Our lives would be happy if we had them, all the happiness in the ads when you have this product. So we aren't living what I would call a real life. And I don't think you can unless you're reflective. And if you're reflective, to lead that life that is genuine, I think you have to know your values.
I'm curious, in a given week, Reagan and Lisa both, how much time do you think you give to reflection that Lisa's talking about?
Not
Reagan.
very.
Not very.
Not very much time. I'd say maybe like 30 minutes a week or so.
And when do you do that, Reagan? Do you do it when you're doing dishes? Do you prayer?
So since we were in hybrid mode this year because of COVID, one of my teachers, he would never assign us work on Monday. He would give us like a task to complete because it's a leadership course that I'm taking. And so he would be like, plan out your week and reflect on how, like, set a goal for yourself. So it's kind of just, he gives us little ideas, or we have a journal that we have to do every Monday, Wednesday to reflect on how we're doing and what's been happening and how it's making us feel. So I'd say those 2 times are the very like specific ones that I know I'm doing it.
Coursework. Interesting. Isn't that interesting, Sammy?
Well, it's interesting. Well, it's a course. It's a great course that she's part of. And I actually am curious to look at the syllabus. But Lisa, in a given week or in a given day, do you pause to reflect to see what things are important to you and prioritize your life around it?
All the time. My dogs think they're going for a walk, but really I'm going for reflection time.
It's interesting. I think people meditate, pray, and walk, do things in order to pause and reflect. Mm-hmm. But it has become such a routine in a way that you sort of force yourself to do some thinking, which is not really, like my mom does prayer, and that prayer is very, she has a list of 20 things she always asks for. Until she gets it, she's gonna continue to pray for that. And what I find for me, my idea of reflection is actually emptying myself out.
Mhm.
It used to be, Reagan, this is interesting. When I was young, I used to pray every morning or every night. And I would have 5 things on my mind: take care of my parents, take care of my family, take care of, may I do well my schoolwork and all this, right? That was what I thought prayer was. But when I walk, it's not even meditation, it's emptying, like taking out all the junk in my head, burning all the negative energy, and coming to a core. And at that point in which I completely empty out, nothing enters in. And then for some reason, I am able to go back to work and prioritize. And I don't know why that is, where that shift occurred, but I think what we need to figure out is how each person does it differently.
Yeah.
Making a list of what you want. This is why I don't like this objective listing the goals in a given week, because I feel like it's more of making yourself busy. And that's my concern, is when we have a list of objectives, are we really prioritizing, or are we making a list of things to do to make ourselves more busy that week? And I don't know.
And I really do think that this has to do also with your advancement with the process. And I think
Yes.
age matters. I think that, like you say, you make a list when you're young and you drive yourself to these things you need to get done. And I absolutely, this emptying is so, I think it's so critical. And I think part of that is also age, that by our age, we've got so much baggage we're carrying. And I really understand as I age why older people are cranky. They have so much that they're carrying around that they're not able to put down. They're not even aware it's there. And so I think that process of stopping and just taking it all off and leaving it, just letting it all go. And then you can move forward and figure out, okay, now I don't want to be cranky with people. And I do value this, so I'm going to do that. I forgot to do this and I'm going to do that. I think that you can do both, but that emptying, I think, as you age becomes the more important.
We have only a couple of minutes. Final thoughts as we close on this conversation on values, and basically what it means for us in terms of how we approach our work in social justice.
Reagan, young people first.
I think when we use our values and put them to good use in social justice, in which we're trying to impact, it's important to think about and know what your values are. That way you can help others and be aware of yourself to improve yourself, to then improve how you can help others. If that makes sense.
It does.
It does, Reagan. It does.
Okay.
Lisa, final thoughts?
I really agree with that. I would say there's 2 parts to it. And the one is clarifying and understanding yourself so that you can be your best person to the world around you, and recognize that what you bring to the world is far more important than all the petty small things that you might otherwise end up wrapping your life around. And the second thing I'd say is that when you do that, at the end of the day, it makes your own life meaningful. At the end of the day, we die. So everything we accumulate and do for ourselves is disappears with us. But when you are outwardly focused, which I think values ultimately need to be to carry forward, because we do die and we leave with the world what our values have taught and shown through our lifestyle.
One final thing, though, I want to add is we can only be outwardly focused when we're inwardly at peace. And that's you can't separate the two.
Yes.
All right. Thank you both. Appreciate it. This is the end of our conversation.
Thanks.